Episode number 81 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Dr. Christiane Northrup. Dr. Northrup is the New York Times bestselling author of Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, The Wisdom of Menopause, and Goddesses Never Age, as well as the host of 8 public television specials. A board-certified OBGYN with more than 30 years of clinical experience, Dr. Northrup has been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, The View, The Today Show, and Good Morning America, among many others. Dr. Northrup has been a huge inspiration, not only in my life, but in my mom's life as well. She's a thought leader who has always been ahead of her time. She's led with tremendous courage during a time in medicine when many professionals did not acknowledge the mind-body connection and understand women's bodies from a holistic point of view. I have been dreaming of this day to have Dr. Northrup on my podcast, and I'm so honored to have her as a guest today. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Northrup.
It is my pleasure to be here.
I have loved you, I've known you and have read, been a big, huge fan, and you've inspired me so much. And as you know, I love women's health and I love what you've done. I feel like you've created this mainstream, you've brought consciousness of women's health into mainstream medicine. And I think it's incredible. I really do feel like you've brought that to the table and to the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It was more of a compulsion than a desire. It's just like one thing led to another, you know, the way it is. I mean, when someone gets pregnant, the body makes the baby, but it's a co-creation between the soul of the baby and the mother. Yes. And it's bigger than the consciousness of the mother. She doesn't say, oh, I'm going to make a couple of blue eyes here.
That's right. No.
there's a bigger agenda, and that's kind of how my career has been.
Yeah, so it kind of birthed you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that was actually my first question is, I think that you were so brave, because I know how difficult it is to, especially in the early 90s, to break through in an old school set way of thinking and amongst a lot of MDs. And I just can only imagine, because even now there's that old school still there and resisting as we just spoke like in the pre-talk. So where did you get that courage, and how did you go that way? It's fascinating.
Yeah, it came from my family of origin. So let's just say I was radicalized before medical school, because I think that's the only way you could do it, because medical school and residency training is like trench warfare. You learn what you need to do to survive. And when I went through, night call was every third night for 4 years. And my husband at the time was every other night. So there's a thing that you develop where you bond with your fellow doctors. Otherwise, as one of my colleagues said, if you're going down, take someone with you, meaning that if you've got a bad situation, get someone else in the room, because if you're going to get sued, it would be better to have witnesses. I mean, it's a real kind of a warfare thing. But before I went to med school, when I was a kid, I had a baby sister born. My mother had been put on antibiotics for viral pneumonia. They don't work for viral pneumonia, but back then, so this would have been, the 60s, I think, maybe even the 50s, who knows, I can't remember. But anyhow, I was a kid, and this sister of mine was born and wouldn't eat. So she died at the age of 6 months in the hospital. And it was a time when they wouldn't let parents hold a baby, because that's how it used to be. The hospitals were fortresses against germs. I mean, if you can imagine, I was a resident when I first put a baby on the mother's abdomen after delivering it. Or, the mother delivered it, I catch it. And I put it on the mother's abdomen so I can keep the cord pulsating until it stops, which is how nature intended it. And my attending physician said, she touched your glove, you're no longer sterile, right? And I said, Dr. McGovern, I just delivered a baby through the vagina. The
Mhm.
only way to sterilize a baby is to boil it. I mean, so I
Right.
had these things that today makes so much sense, but delaying cord clamping, putting the baby right on the mother was anathema. When I was a med student at Dartmouth, we would drape the mother like a surgical procedure so that the only thing showing was the opening for the baby. You had to get the drapes on right because like surgical, and then the baby would be born. They clamp the cord immediately and rush the baby off to the nursery to warm it up. I
Yeah,
remember thinking, this is the craziest thing I have ever seen. But
it is.
so we'll go back. So this kid dies, my 6-month-old sister, and the doctors never knew what was wrong and why she wouldn't eat. I think it was damage from the antibiotics, but
Hmm.
medicine usually doesn't admit this stuff
Right.
till years later.
Yeah.
Then my brother Bill was born, and he wouldn't eat. And my mother ran into a nurse at the hospital who said, Mrs. Northrup, if I were you, I'd get him out of here. The doctors don't know what's going on. Now, no nurse would ever say that now.
Wow.
And you couldn't sign anyone out against medical advice, or they'd take your kid.
Mhm.
The state would take your child.
Wow, that's crazy.
But anyway, my mother and father took him home. My dad was a dentist, and he put down an NG tube every hour on the hour to keep my brother alive. And they continued to search for answers. And at a year old, they found a doctor at Women's Medical, which no longer exists. And she was a pediatric endoscopist. In other words, she knew how to put down the fiber optic light and look into the esophagus.
Hmm.
My mother had been lied to. They told her they did that. In Buffalo, they didn't. And she said, the esophagus is so irritated, we got to take the tube out, or he will rupture his esophagus. And the doctor, a woman with common sense, said, let's just see what happens. Maybe he'll get hungry and start to eat. No, he was a year old and weighed 10 pounds. And the original doctors, told my mother that he was mentally defective, that something was wrong with this kid. Anyway, my brother started to eat. We will never know what the diagnosis, what it was about. It was not pyloric stenosis, the usual thing. I've had other doctors review the records. Nobody knows. But then I'm interviewing for medical school because I thought it was a better degree than a PhD. I never intended to go to medical school. I saw my aunt and uncle, both medical doctors, and I thought their lifestyle sucked. They'd always, Christmas dinner, they'd have to be home at 7. I realize now they probably were just handing out phenobarbital to their addict patient. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're not. Anyhow, I didn't want to practice. So I go to med school, I'm interviewing. And during that time, my dad was checked into the CCU, cardiac intensive care unit, for chest pain. And on day 3, he calls my mother. He goes, come and get me. They don't know what's going on. And the IV was infiltrated. He had a fever. He walked out of there. The nurses, of course, were furious. So he had the chest leads on. He walks out. My mother takes him out. I come home from New Haven at the time, and he is sitting up in a chair, fluid 2/3 of the way up his lung field. The doctors didn't know what was going on. He had infectious pericarditis. He did not
Oh
have a
my
heart
God.
attack. And so it was
Wow.
the wrong diagnosis, the wrong treatment, and he healed at home. So notice, I go to medical school with two, as opposed to everyone else who goes to medical school, because they're going to save the family member who
Right.
medicine, wasn't able to save. They're going to make sure that mom never dies on their watch. In my case, it's like, I'm going to try to figure out why doctors don't tell you everything that's going on. And I'm also going to infuse into people the knowledge that they can heal, that they have an ability to heal. And
Wow.
my career has been kind
That's
of
incredible.
divinely, yeah, it is
Yeah.
divinely guided.
Love it.
I
Love it.
interviewed at University of Buffalo. Who's the guy who interviews me? The attending physician of my brother when he was an infant. Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah. And
Wow. That's insane.
yeah, we think the universe is random. It isn't.
No, it's not. Yeah, I just got the chills like quite a few times since you've been telling me this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I go to med school because I thought it was a better degree than a PhD. I never thought I'd practice, blah, blah, blah. And then I see a baby born at Dartmouth Medical School. And I just burst into tears, but you're not, back then, if a
Just got the
woman was
chills
emotional,
again.
oh yeah, and I wanted to fall to
Mhm.
the floor with this pain-filled joy, joy-filled pain. The
Mm.
nurse was yelling at the student for letting go of the umbilical cord, which is like a little tiny fire hose, so it's spattering blood all over. And I am so transported by this holy moment that I said, nobody should be in this room who isn't anything but in holding the space for something that is sacred.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
so
Yes.
moved. Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's an awakened perception.
Yeah. And that's why I went into OBGYN, because I was moved to tears. And so what I tell people is go to the path that moves you to tears. That's your path.
Yes. Oh my God. I keep getting the chills. It's like, and I feel the chills are so involuntary
Yes.
that it's just, it's like a signal of truth.
Yeah. It's a
I just,
guidance system. It's a
yeah.
guidance system. Yep.
Well, I
You
got a bunch of chills, so you're right on. Whatever you're saying, and I so relate to it. And it's interesting because I had irregular periods since I got my period at 13. And I remember at 17 years old going to a GYN
yeah.
and expecting at 17, my mom's like, okay, I'll take you to the doctor. Let's fix this. I wasn't sexually active. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, he's going to give me like a solution. I'll go home with something. I came home with a pill. And I remember thinking to myself, well, first of all, I'm not sexually active. And I told him, I said, well, I'm not sexually active. Why are you giving me the pill? And he said, well, you're going to get your period every month.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
said, but then what happens when I get off of the pill? And he goes, well, you're going to go back to normal. You have to go on the pill. And I'm like, wait a second. And I remember being blown away. I really thought doctors had cures I was 17 years old. I didn't know, but it's interesting because my grandmother, she's very natural. She told me if you eat garlic every day, she used to tell me just like all you need is God's food. Whatever grows on nature, like out of nature, is from God. You're from God. It's compatible. And she hated doctors. She didn't want to take any pills. She's like, they try to give me these pills. Forget it. I'm having garlic. I heal myself. I mean, she had all these different ideas and wisdom, and
Yeah.
it's just crazy. So I remember being perplexed at that time, and I said, wow, doctors don't have the solution. And it
Well,
was
it's
like an
wonderful, but
awakening.
see, that's your soul qualities. Because what most people would think is, oh, something's wrong with my car. I'm just going to put duct tape over the indicator light. It's called a birth control pill.
Yeah,
Women go, this regulates your period. No, it doesn't.
no,
Instead
it
of
pretends
cycling
to.
with the moon, you
Hmm.
get to cycle with orthopharmaceutical, which pretty much runs the OBGYN residencies, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. And so, like you said, we were talking before, you're talking about who knows if there's pharmaceuticals or if the person that said something, when we were talking before, that is the thing. It's so complex and there's so many different voices behind the scenes that we don't see and that are not necessarily in line with our best interest. And
That's
so,
right.
like I said, this is so old and you've been there in the beginning. So walk us through, how did you, I guess you got the courage because it just was something that you felt within you. And then getting, it must have been crazy to bring out your message in the face of that.
Oh, it was, but okay, I'll tell you where I learned kind of how to do it. So imagine, like I said, my dad's brother and sister were medical doctors. So
Mhm.
therefore, Thanksgiving and Christmas, where you're around the table with Aunt Harriet and Uncle Robert, and they kind of made fun of my dad, who was the dentist, a holistic dentist, who, my mother would make
Holistic.
yogurt and he'd take it down the street to his patients who were on antibiotics.
Oh, wow.
So we were into the work of Weston Price and Adele Davis and all the pioneers in natural living. So he was always happier and healthier than they were, but there was a lot of love in the family, you see.
Hmm.
So I kind of learned how you walk back and forth, and you don't get angry, and you try to find the common ground. And many
Hmm.
times what I would say is, if I continued to be included in the jokes, then I knew I was safe. And I loved my colleagues. That's the other thing. And Andy Weil years ago, he said to me, you can say almost anything as long as you're not angry.
It's
And
true. That's so
so,
true.
it's true. So and many of my colleagues kind of knew the truth of a lot of the stuff I was doing, but they didn't have the courage because, like I said, you get into the herd mentality. Like right now on the planet, the doctors who are coming up and saying the current paradigm of this virus, there's some parts missing, and if someone questions the narrative, they're fired. You see, so we people do what they do to stay safe. But what I did know after my second child was born, and I loved my practice and I loved my colleagues, but I knew that something had to give because I needed to spend a little more time with the second baby. A second baby is usually like the game changer. You can do one, but man, you get two and everything has to change. And I wanted to come in on Mondays at 10 in the morning. That's it. That's all I wanted to do, keep everything else the same. And the head of my group said, you can do that, but we'll have to cut your salary in half. And he had some productivity formula, and I was bringing in more new patients than anyone in the practice. So I considered myself a rainmaker. And because again, I loved my colleagues, so I'd bring someone in and she'd go over here for infertility surgery and over there for colposcopy, and because people had their little subspecialties. So I went to the lawyer and I said, how can we do the productivity sheets so that my contribution is recognized here and monetized? And he looked at me and he said, Chris, you're just going to have to do more surgery. And that was anathema to me. I mean, you could make the case that everyone who ever had a menstrual cramp might have endometriosis, and therefore you should put in a laparoscope.
Right.
And I've met doctors who practice that way. My job was to keep people out of the operating room.
Right.
And so there was no way to monetize things you don't do, right? And
That's right.
but right around this time in the mid 80s, I was introduced to the American Holistic Medical Association, founded by Norm Shealy, a neurosurgeon, and Gladys McGarry, who had 6 kids and delivered babies at home, and wonderful woman. And so I found my tribe of like-minded doctors, and I served on the board, eventually became president with Dr. Bernie Siegel. We all need social support. We all need other people who believe in what we believe. No one is an island now more than ever before.
Yeah.
So I had this group of physicians, and we'd have our annual meeting. And, not only did I learn a lot of nutritional medicine from like Alan Gaby and Robert Anderson, those people, but I also had a like-minded support group. But then I realized this is not sustainable. I need a support group in my own town. I was married to a person who was like being married to the American Medical Association. He didn't believe in anything that I believed in. And again, though, that served me well. First of all, because it made me look normal. So there was that. I mean, I kind of looked like I was normal, never was. And, but we had the house. We didn't have the golden retriever, but, And so that was actually very, very helpful. But let me be very honest. I was kind of scared all the time that my colleagues would find out. I wrote a column for what was then East West Journal, founded by the Michio Kushi, who started Erewhon Natural Foods. And they now have, a great place in Venice, California. And I began to write for the magazine, a little column. And then I would go to some of these meetings in Boston of my colleagues. And the head of my program, Dr. George Mitchell, the absolute ultimate patriarch, white-haired, handsome, tall surgeon, he came up to me and he said, whatever happened to you? You used to be one of our best residents. How did you fall off the truck that badly? And so but again, I loved people, so that was okay. And they just saw me as eccentric. And the anesthesiologist would say, your patients are crazy. Everyone else's are normal. And I was on the cover of East West Journal in 1981, and I said, do not publish this till after I am certified, until I'm board certified.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can put me on the cover. And then when that magazine landed at our food co-op in Portland, I had them call me when that comes in. And I went to the food co-op and I bought every single issue with my picture on the cover, so none of the doctors would see it.
Wow.
Meanwhile, I'm getting calls in labor and delivery from all over the world, from people who are interested. Then when I wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, because I didn't find anywhere, not in the holistic literature, not in the spiritual literature, I found nothing that was correlated with what I was seeing and what my patients were telling me. Now remember, I was told, your patients are crazy. Just like any woman who said Harvey Weinstein sexually abused her, she's crazy. That's how it was, right? But so when I wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, and that came out, I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming that someone was in the house with a gun and that they were going to kill me. I think
you felt like nervous.
Well, I think it's you walk through the morphogenic field of all the times when women have been persecuted and men who love them and shamans and herbalists and so on. So, remember 9 million women were killed as witches after the Malleus Maleficorum of the Catholic Church was.
So it's almost like in our DNA, like we remember this somewhere in our energy field. And what you're referring to with the women, them saying that your patients are crazy, is that they would have certain symptoms that would correlate to trauma.
Always.
And it would show up in their bodies.
That's right. Sexual abuse, pelvic pain, slam dunk. I remember going to a grand round.
It's amazing.
Where this guy.
Not amazing, but it's the connection.
Well, see, it's crazy that, I once got the best prescription I ever got from a DO, Jim Jealous, wonderful, classically trained osteopath. And here's the referral note. Birth control pills are blunting her intuition, suggest other means. And it was unbelievable. I thought, wow, this guy knows that this is putting her on a direct current when she needs to be on an alternating current. And
the connection, the smell, they can't smell their right partner.
That's right. Isn't that? Yes. Yeah. So you wake up and you realize, wait, I married the wrong person and my body wanted me to know, but yeah. Anyway, I said to him, Jim, how do you know this? He goes, I guess I'm just too stupid not to have noticed, because you get talked out of in medical school and in the higher echelons of learning and in the mainstream media. You get talked out of what you know and what you feel. And women are, let's just put it this way, most women, most of the time, are more intuitive than most right-handed, left hemisphere dominant white males. Most of the time, okay? So we are just more connected. And we've been told that we're crazy for knowing this stuff. I mean, it's changing, and it's changing rapidly. Yeah. We're in the post-Me Too era. I mean, I was transfixed by the Harvey Weinstein story. I don't read the mainstream media. I read the New York Times. I was transfixed because I knew, wait a minute, this is a sea change. And I think we're in an era where we're going to start seeing this with all kinds of things, where the scales fall from people's eyes at the way that we've been manipulated.
Yes, and also how we're shifting right now from a very young male energy to all of a sudden halted to a yin at this time right now.
You gotta love it. I mean, despite all of what I know to be true, but the bigger picture, the 5-dimensional picture, is stop. This is kind of like one of my patients who said to me once, okay, I needed to be in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling for 2 months. It's the only thing that was going to change the trajectory that I was on.
That's exactly what came to my mind, is a person that's running themselves ragged, getting the flu, and then the body saying, hey, you got to stop. Then they stop and they're forced to rest. This is what's happening on a global scale. It's insane. And you know what? It's interesting. People like it. I've seen people, I'm riding their bikes with their families, spending more time together. There's this element of craving this pause. And obviously, like you said, not we don't want, I mean, not to say that it's good that people are getting sick or anything like that. It's not, but it's this grand scale. And it really comes down to the fact that we're not the only things or beings or living creatures on earth. It's not all about us as
Right.
humans. It's
That's
about the
right.
earth being able to breathe.
That's right. And that's
Mhm.
what's happened, like it or not. This
Yeah.
is sort of biblical proportions. There's
Hmm.
so many wisdom teachings that have talked about this. So I really believe it's a rebirth for the earth and humanity. That's how it feels to me. And having attended enough labors, I know
Yes.
that there is a time when a woman just says, like, just a transition, she's about to get fully dilated and push, and she goes, I'm done. I am leaving. I am not doing this. And I think
Hmm.
that's where we are.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. And it's like this cocoon. We're like in this cocoon right now. This is the time. And with that, it was interesting. I'm gonna, I was gonna talk about this later, but I want to talk about it now since we're on topic. Like I watch your Instagram
Oh,
videos
great.
and I've
Oh,
been
great.
really enjoying them. I really like your insight. I like your ability to perceive wisdom in everything. And I think that what you mentioned was some right on. It's something that I notice also with my patients. Um, because they're nervous, they can't come in, and some of them had to pause their IVF, and there's a lot of triggers going on
Oh,
right
yeah.
now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what we want to do is, if you are triggered, it means that this is stuff that needed to come up anyway.
Mm,
And so it's kind of like a global triggering. And what I want to say to the people it is our job, I believe this, as light workers, to really help those who can only see in a three-dimensional reality. They're not going to find the answers they're looking for in the mainstream news. They're not going to
true.
find more information that at this point seems to me is just the purpose is to scare people to death, to feed darkness.
Mm,
So this is their time, kind of like what we said, where someone has an accident, they're staring at the ceiling and they're saying, I really needed this because I was on an unsustainable path.
mm-hmm.
What I'd like to see, I mean, let's think about it. It is spring. It is the season when lambs are giving birth. It is the season of birth.
Oh,
You know,
I just
you
got the
know,
chills again.
yeah, yeah. So imagine if you, okay, because you had said, can you give me some advice to help women get pregnant? And the advice that I would give is now, because there's very little else to do, I want you to put your feet on the earth as much as you possibly can, to get out in ambient light without sunglasses and without contact lenses. Now, you don't need to look at the sun directly, but light itself is a nutrient. And when I was trying to get pregnant with my first, and I was a resident, and you had to kind of like plan it because everyone was so busy. I would when I kept basal body temperatures. This was before the Daisy apps. This is where you took
Hmm.
your temperature with the mercury and you charted it on a thing. And what I noticed is when I was out in natural light, that ovulation curve in the basal body temperature, where the temperature rises zero point 0.8 degrees around the time of ovulation because of progesterone as a warming hormone, the graph without the natural light would be kind of go up slowly. With natural light, boom, it literally entrained ovulation. So imagine, here we are in the time of fertility. The fertility is returning to the earth. Persephone has come from the underworld to be with her mother Demeter. And I want people to observe the crocuses coming up, the daylilies coming up. Just observe the little new buds in the trees. Listen to the birds, the nesting. There's so much fertility right now. I
Hmm.
mean, we're teeming with fertility. And this is where humans need to remember we are mammals. We
Hmm.
are mammals. We're keyed in. Now, the other thing I would do, because the veil between the worlds of 3D and 5D is much thinner than it's ever been. While you're standing on the ground or seated on the ground on a rock, or hug a tree or grab a tree branch because that will ground you, I would invite in the soul that wants to come, because you are the channel for the soul that wants to come, your old friends. And inevitably, now I want to tell you something really interesting. I work with Julie Ryan, a medical intuitive, and she said, when a baby comes into the mother, when she conceives, Julie can see the light, the soul of the baby in the biologic mother. She can see the same light in the adoptive mother.
Oh, you just gave
Doesn't
me
it?
chills again.
I know.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So there isn't any mistake here.
Mm.
There's no mistake.
Oh my God, I just got the
You,
chills, chills, chills. That's amazing.
me too. Like, you get your children.
That's right.
You can't not get your children.
100%. And I've spoken to so many people from all walks of life when they're trying to get pregnant have adopted. And the ones who have adopted said, I would have not had it any other way. Now that I have my child, he's my child. Same thing with egg donors.
Yes.
Everything. Yes, it's their
Everything.
child.
That's right. That's right. So, up in the giant computer lab in the sky where everything, it's all energetic. It's all vibrational.
Mm-hmm.
But you get what the vibration, your point of attraction. So I think anyone, and even if, let's say, your IVF cycle has been interrupted, I mean, nobody knows what we're going to do.
That's right.
Financially, right?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
what is finances? That's second chakra. That's the same place the ovaries are. That's
Mm-hmm.
where fertility is.
Right.
So I would do hip circles. I would do as many sensual things as you can possibly do. This is a good one. My daughter taught me about this. You've probably heard.
I loved her book, by the way. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, she has extended the legacy in her own special way, in a way that I never, ever could. But I want to give someone a really concrete thing to do. And that would be, when you make love, this is a fun thing to do. You can get, if you have access, get as much cash as you possibly can in bills. Now, if you can get $10 bills, great. $20 bills, great. $100 bills, you can get, like 10 of those. You can just redeposit it in the bank. It's okay. But you want to literally make the connection between the energy that creates worlds and money and fertility and your ovaries and the earth. So I can't even imagine a more potent time to conceive of anything, a new career path, a new path toward parenthood, a new whatever. I mean, this is like a reboot
It's a reboot for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's talk about creativity and the second chakra. I think it's so interesting because you look at the different energies of creation. So there's this physical creation that really comes from above. It comes from an energy.
Yes. Yes.
So vibrating on that energy of creation is interesting to me because you have to feel safe. And where does it sit? It sits on the first chakra of the root chakra. So you have to feel safe. And how interesting how they all work together, one on top of the next. And in order to create, you need to feel secure. You can't do it being afraid.
No, in fact, safety and security wire in the bones and the blood and the immunity. So therefore, let me be very clear for your listeners. Chances are very good that big pharma is not going to save you. Your doctor is not going to save you. The government is not going to save you. You have to become sovereign of your own life, become the queen of your own life. Now, when you just ask, so what I would do, be very concrete, ask for a sign. Ask for a sign. And my friend Tosha Silver, she wrote Outrageous Openness, Letting the Divine Take the Lead. And I learned from her that the signs are everywhere. So she'll sometimes, she'll call me and take a picture of the license plate of the car in front of her. And once I was going to a tango lesson and I was in a, why am I doing this? And then I saw that license plate in front of me said fun. It's like, yeah, this is for fun, which raises the vibration. Louise Hay used to say, creations that are loved into being are permanent.
Mm.
Creations that are forced into being,
Ooh,
not so good.
I love that.
So what you want to do, and then remember, and Ina May Gaskin, the famous midwife, she says, the energy that gets the baby in gets the baby out. But that's physical conception.
Oxytocin.
With any conception,
Yeah.
when you get yourself aligned, that everything's happening for the good, that everything's working out for you, and then put those little things around on 3M notes. Everything is working out for me. Then that's how you create. You create from that point instead of the unsustainable point where, oh God, I have to do this. I don't want to do this. This is, the women who are in standard fertility clinics who don't know what you know. And, every time they get their period, they're just, just shattered. And the sort of production model, like you've got to do it by this time, and then all the pleasure goes out of their life. So whenever possible, have as much fun and as much pleasure as you possibly can. And then minute by minute, because it sometimes has to be that way, minute by minute, you just find the higher vibrational thing. Like, oh, today my bladder works. Oh,
Yeah.
I got to sleep last night. I have 2 eyes that can see. Just start. Chris Wark is a friend of mine, and he has a great business. Chris beat cancer, and he recovered from stage 3 bowel cancer at the age of 28. And he said, I got onto gratitude as though my life depended on it. And he said, some days it would just be that I'm not stuck in a hospital bed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that is perspective.
Yep.
It is gratitude. It's really amazing. I almost feel like it's too mystical to really say and describe in words the power that it gives and provides in your life. It's just the most amazing thing. It's the most amazing medicine.
It is. And it's not too dramatic. So it doesn't kind of get our attention. But it can be, though, so heartfelt. I was once reported to the Board of Registration in Medicine, and you were asking me, how did I get through? Well, I had a bunch of lawsuits. Believe me, I've had all kinds of close calls, patients reporting me, that kind of thing, because I was many times telling them about their power to get well, and they would see it as, I think it was confronting. Oh, wait a minute. She's not going to save me. I have to do something. In a certain kind of personality, that's really, no, this isn't a real
They
doctor.
didn't believe you.
They
Yeah.
didn't believe me. But anyway, so I had a woman come to see me, and she had called ahead, and she said, my surgeon tells me that I have bowel cancer, but I've been on a macrobiotic diet for a month. All my symptoms have gone away. Could you just see me? Now, at the time I was working with the Boston macrobiotic community. So I said to her, look, I don't know whether or not you have cancer, but let's do this. It's all working. And generally no cancer grows that fast. You have time. We got the emergency mindset. Oh my God, you got to get it out, right away. And that's really not true. And especially because her stool caliber was back to normal, everything's good. So I said, why don't we do this? You come back in a month, or maybe it was 3 months, and let's get all your tests repeated at another institution. And I set her up at Dartmouth Hitchcock so she could get everything done there. In the meantime, her surgeon and I sent him a letter, said, this is our plan. I know of one case where a guy had stage 4 bowel cancer, metastatic to the liver, and he recovered totally with a macrobiotic diet. Now, this was years before the documentary Radical Remission, okay? And so I wrote to him, and he reported me to the Board of Registration in Medicine in the state of Maine. And I didn't know if I was going to lose my license or whatever. And what he said is it the standard of practice of medicine in Maine to treat bowel cancer with a macrobiotic diet? Like, well, no. And then she herself, the patient herself, wrote to the Board of Medicine in Maine and said, look, I am of sound mind and this is my choice. I'm willing to take this risk. And one night, and it was very, very difficult. I had a constant knot in my solar plexus for a couple months, waiting for the board to come up with their, either stamp of approval or you're out.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was doing the practice of proprioceptive writing at the time, and I spontaneously began to write a letter to this surgeon. And I knew that his intent really was just to be a healer and just to help this woman. And he really thought that I was dangerous. And I spontaneously wrote a letter to him, not one that I would send, but that I know, and, and I forgive you kind of a thing. The next day, the Board of Registration in Medicine dropped the case.
Wow.
I knew if I could heal it inside me,
Oh my
it would
God.
heal outside.
Such an empowering thing.
Yeah.
That's where true power comes.
It does.
Knowing
Yeah.
your own connection with your experience and what's happening in your life.
That's right. That's right. And also, I think, to be willing to stand up for your principles despite herd mentality.
Right. And speaking your truth, which is
Yeah.
why a lot of women have a lot of conditions, because they weren't speaking their truth. It's that
It's
throat
violent.
chakra is stuck.
You got it. You got
Yeah.
it. And understandably so.
Of course, because it's dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, even in med school, I remember my biochemistry course, and the professor goes, there are no stupid questions. I ask a question and he goes, what a stupid question. He really said that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, okay, I want to talk about moon cycles. That
Yeah.
is it's just so fascinating to me. And it's interesting because the reason I got my period normalized was because I went to a Chinese doctor. I used to have, my job was to be an architect. I was an architect in New York City, and I was very imbalanced, very stressed out in a man's world. I used
Yes.
to have, oh my God, I don't know if you probably have heard of liver chi stagnation.
Yes.
Plus.
Always.
So,
Always.
I mean, stress, I was like classic.
Yeah.
And I finally at age 25 went to an acupuncturist and he regulated my period. And I was blown away. But I knew I was always interested in this because of my grandmother. It was just always something I felt more connected with. So completely shifted my balance. But what's interesting is I started noticing the moon, but I would
Yeah.
cycle with the moon. I would actually have a blood moon.
Yes. Yes.
So we're talking about that because I mean, ideally, you go, because it's a very yin. The full moon is very yin. Yin is very juicy. It's moist. It's cervical mucus to the nth degree. So you had mentioned that in the book. So lifting that, all of that in, I had the opposite, but I have read that that's medicine women tend to have that, or people that are a little outside of the box.
What I notice about that is that I had a patient who had that. She moved to New Mexico, where the moon looks gigantic because, the sky is kind of endless. And everything in her life that was intense became intensified. And she said she needed it intensified for that period of time because it makes everything more intense. Then I said to her, just notice the moon. That's all. In your calendar, just put down when the new moon is. Just notice it, that's all. And put the phases of the moon down. And then what happened to her and what happens to many women, just the noticing will shift the period back to the new moon.
Oh, wow.
So that then the full moon is ovulation.
Right.
But the main thing is to not worry about it, because in our patriarchal culture, honest to God, we have all these rules like, oh, well, you only want, if you don't have your period on the new moon, or the dark of the moon, something is wrong with you.
Right,
You're doing
right.
something wrong. And it's
Yeah.
not. It's like, no, you have a different course that you're completing.
Right. And then I also heard that, back in the day when women would get their periods all at the same time, there would be the other women that would alternate and they would be there to take care of them.
Yes,
And so it would have, it would almost need that balance. So some
that's
people
right.
would kind of take that on. It's so interesting. So another thing I wanted to talk about is, to the point that we were talking about before with old school, I still get women, and I've had just recently, beautifully enough, we have two quarantine pregnancies with my patients. And one of them just recently came to me right before I had to stop treating her.
Yeah,
And so she went to a doctor, and the doctor said, your FSH, your numbers are horrible. You're probably not going to be able to get pregnant on your own.
oh God,
And so I had to work with her, because I also certified in hypnotherapy because of the mind. I just feel like it's so important. I had to
yeah,
work with her on letting that go. Plus, luckily, she's a very conscious person. She's really conscious. She's very spiritual, and she knew better
yeah.
within her own gut. Now, so I want to talk about, a lot of the listeners have probably had this experience, and probably are going to have this experience when they go to doctor's office and they get these prognosis. How can they tune in? You talk a lot about that inner guide and inner guidance and inner wisdom. How can they tune into that? Because it seems like an uphill battle sometimes.
Oh, it's
With
insidious.
authority, you have an
Oh
authority
my
in front
God.
of you, and yeah.
Well, first of all, what are we telling women based on, I think, some obsolete study of French Huguenots? We're telling
Yeah.
women that at age 35, their fertility plummets,
Yeah.
which it does not. I mean, it's like,
Thank
okay,
you.
um, you know, I am 34 and a half, and I'm fertile. I will have no problem getting pregnant. But, oh, I just had my 35th birthday. That's got to be the end. Now I'm going to need assisted reproductive technology. This and these are what Mario Martinez calls cultural portals, and they are more powerful than our biology.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a huge portal for women. 35. If I'm 35 and I haven't met the man of my dreams or the woman that I want to partner with or whatever, it's too late for me. I'm going to need help. When in fact, the second most um, the second most common group to have abortions is women in their 40s because they didn't think they could get pregnant.
Oh my God, that is such a
Isn't that
good wake up
unbelievable?
call.
Because they've been told. They've been
Yep.
told, oh, no, no, after 35, you won't get pregnant. I had a patient once, and every OBGYN has these stories. And the woman came in and with indigestion and I don't know, weight gain, whatever, 52. She thought she was menopausal. She was almost at term in a pregnancy.
Oh my God.
Now that's okay. That is how severe the mind body split can get. How do you not know that you have a baby moving in here? Except that I've seen it. I have seen it where people live from the neck up, you
Right.
know?
Yes.
And she was then terrified because, she hadn't had a genetic test and any of that thing, but she delivered a perfectly normal baby. So, what I tell people is it's very interesting. We have studies in mice from MIT showing that the ovaries actually produce new eggs. So that's a mammal, a
That's
mouse.
amazing. So we're not necessarily born with them, that the
That's right.
ovaries
We
can
don't
actually.
know. And I think that okay, so let me just say something that's really just the truth. There's a time frame when a woman is perimenopausal. Let's say from age 42 or sometimes 38 or whatever, to 52, where she's between the worlds. And on any given day, her FSH LH will change.
Mm-hmm.
So that I see women and they're told, oh, your FSH is really high, so you'll
Right.
never
It's a
get pregnant.
snapshot.
Yeah, no, it's a snapshot. And then it goes down, and you can get it to go down with nutrition, with, all kinds of things. You probably know the book Inconceivable. There's just many, many, many women who have turned around that narrative. The problem is, I think, medical hexing, where
Right.
you're told this is your diagnosis, this is the prognosis, this is the course of the disease, as though any condition exists outside of our own consciousness.
Right.
And the longer I am in medicine, the more nuts the mainstream medicine feels to me. It's like conventional medicine has, other than if you're in a car accident or you break your leg, conventional medicine just has very little to offer unless you're in an emergency situation,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't understand health. I had to invent a language of women's health. There was no language of women's health. There was only disease screening. There was women's non-health.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. Because, you treat the symptom
that's right.
rather than the person, and
Yeah.
rather than understanding what is causing things to begin with. But yeah, I mean, so with that, obviously, it doesn't matter how amazing of a doctor you are. You just don't know everything. Nobody knows everything.
Right. And besides, in all the medical literature, here's what you find over and over. Before saying that something works and you should be doing it, especially if it's in the health realm, vitamin D, folic acid, DHA, those sorts of things, you'll always hear, well, check with your doctor first. Don't do anything until you
Mm-hmm.
check with your doctor, and more studies need to be done. Now, I have
Mm-hmm.
been reading that crap for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I don't wait until some medical authority, gives it the
Yeah.
seal
The
of
blessing.
approval, which
Yeah.
just means that some business, some big pharma exec went in and decided you could make money off it. So let me tell women how it is. Way back, I would see people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. All the doctors said they're crazy. Now someone came up with a frickin' drug for it, so it's a real thing. You see? So it's always like this. It's
Mm-hmm.
always like this. As soon as big pharma invents a drug for it, they will validate a woman's experience. Then you go,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, okay, I know what that is, because now we have a CPT code for it and we have a drug for it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't buy into that. Don't buy into any of it. So you do your research, you do your due diligence, you find out this and that, but then let it go, including the results of blood tests, because
Mm-hmm.
those can change in a heartbeat.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes. I thank you so much for saying this, because I say it, but obviously you've been doing this and you understand it from both perspectives.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
so I could play this for every one of my patients that comes
Right, my
that talks
husband
about
can't.
FSH and is upset about it. I mean, I've seen people with an AMH of 0.1 something got pregnant within 2 months of getting treatment.
That's right.
And they thought they had to depend on Clomid or some other kind of drug or ART. I mean, so it's just so good to hear this also from an authority that's been around and knows both sides of the spectrum.
That's right. Yep.
So another thing, so I want to talk about Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. I love, 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 love the book. I love the fact that it was so ahead of its time, and you have a new 5th edition.
I do. And it is revised like uh, a revision on steroids. It's a lot of new stuff. I call it my post Me Too book. It'll also probably be the post COVID global lockdown book. And not only did I rewrite the book, but I also created a women's health online course so that women could, just learn what the magic was of each part of the body, so they don't have to wait for some disease. And if they have a diagnosis, they'll know what to do. And so that was a labor of love. And I feel like that bookends my career. So the first edition came out in 94, this edition out in 2020. And it's just a trajectory. More women are awake than ever before. I see women like you and your generation, my daughter's generation, who are so much more open to these ideas than my own generation ever was. And that's really very exciting. And what I want is for each generation to be less and less keyed into what the doctor says and more keyed into what their own body says, so that the first place that you would go for healthcare is homeopathy, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, hypnotherapy, tapping. You would do that first, and you would only go to a regular doctor, conventional, as a last resort. That's actually how I would live my life. I mean, I do not go to standard medical doctors. They have very little to offer me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's also acknowledging and respecting the fact that your body's a self-healing machine, and it really does know how to do it. It's just a matter of having these constant assaults, whether it's environmental or stress related
That's
or
right.
emotional. And once you give it what it needs or answer those calls, then everything, the body knows how to heal itself. So knowing that, it really does bring back the faith and the trust in the body's own unique abilities, which really sometimes gets taken away when you go to the doctor.
Oh, it very often gets taken away.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I went into labor with my first, and all I wanted to do was stay on my hands and knees and going into the hospital sort of changed the whole deal. Then I went into dysfunctional labor, but my body knew what to do. The
Yeah.
beauty of getting pregnant and having a baby is that very, very often a woman will then have unshakable faith in her body.
Hmm.
That's very hard for someone to take away from her if she's very well supported
That's
during
right.
that labor, where her insides are on the outsides, and it is such a golden moment to rewrite the script.
It
Yeah.
is. And was it your book about the doula, the studies that were done with, if somebody has a doula and feels supported, their
Yes,
labor time is much
it's cut
less.
in half. It's
Yeah.
cut in half. And this was John Kennel's work. Marshall Klaus and John Kennel came out with this book, Mother-Infant Bonding, in the 80s. And it was all of the data showing that there's a sensitive period in all mammals. And if you take a baby goat away, let's say, and beyond the sensitive period, then the mother will reject it. And at the time, John Kennel was creating the very first neonatal ICUs at Rainbow and Babies Hospital in Cleveland. And he was finding that when they saved these preemies, kept them in isolettes, and kind of put the mother over to the side, there was a much higher risk of that baby coming into the emergency room battered. And so they
Oh
began
my
to,
God.
oh yeah. Now this is all, it's like all hidden. I would give lectures on this and people would, get pissed about it. But we do know that it's a very sensitive period. Now that does not mean that you can't bond later. You can. I've seen people bond with their mothers when they were
Mhm.
both past menopause. Okay.
Right.
So there's
Right.
this,
Right. Yeah.
but here's the thing. If you have a sensitive period of time, make the most of it. And of
Mhm.
course that is finally filtered down, but I want people to be patient. It takes a while. When my daughter had her first baby, I went in to the hospital, and one of the women that I had worked with like 20 years before said, and I saw a poster, skin to skin is the best place for a baby to be, skin to
Mhm.
skin. I thought I would fall over, like, whoa, I was nearly drummed out of the Corps for doing that. She said to me, from the time you left, I wanted to use everything that you always did, and I wanted to bring it in. And she said, it took me 20 years.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I didn't have that kind of patience. I just left the system. And, there's a couple ways to change the system, depending on your temperament. You can work within it, or you can do what I did, which was work outside of it, influence the people who are within it. And then, hearing from you, it obviously has changed things, because the book is often used in nursing schools and that kind of thing. So it's very gratifying. And especially to have like a shiny new edition
Mhm. I
for,
can't wait to read it.
I
I'm
know, it's
excited.
like, no, it's really, I'm very excited about it. And so now it will be the women who got it for high school graduation, let's say, who are like 17, their mothers gave it to them, or 18. Those women are now entering menopause. So that's very cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is such an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And it was a dream for me to talk to you. And it was really amazing. It was better than I could have ever imagined. And I loved having you on. I know it's already been time, so I would keep you on forever. I have so many things that I could still talk to you about. And I even had to really narrow down my questions. I was telling my husband, I'm like, I don't know, I have so many questions. But maybe if you're willing to come back on one day, that would be great.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on.
You're
This
so
was
welcome.
a true honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was an honor for me as well. And we will keep it going. We'll pass it on.
Awesome.
Okay.
So